Daredevil Born Again, Season 2. This is my spoiler review. I have a review up on my blog, soundedbettermyhead.com. Try to keep as many spoilers out of there as I could. It's kind of hard to do when you're talking about a whole season of a TV show, but, read that at your own risk if you're not expecting any spoilers, but this is going to be full spoilers. I ended up giving this season a 2.5 out of 5. It felt like I was going a little low with that, but it wasn't a bad season at all, but it just never really had any like high points, like any major high points. It was just kind of like, all right, this is pretty good, and it just never really elevated itself, in my opinion. The way this season ended last season 1, looked like Daredevil was about to put together like little armies, more or less, civilians to try to like fight against the Kingpin. And coming in this season, it kind of failed to deliver that. It just felt like it was basically him and Karen and a handful of people kind of helping out behind the scenes, like passing, paperwork and video clips or whatever they needed to like try to get an advantage. So I was kind of surprised. Like I said, I was expecting a little bit more organized resistance against Fisk, where it was just kind of like a handful of people. And really, the big catalyst for like even this story for this season is this Daredevil boards a ship that belongs to the Kingpins, got weapons on it, they sink it intentionally, and it seems like that. I mean, that does kind of kickstart the story, but it ends up not even being that important ultimately. It does come back to, in the very end, does come back to bite the Kingpin in the ass, but before that, it's just kind of gets pushed by the wayside. The captain of the first mate ended up getting killed, and they were important witnesses to what went down. So it's like, okay, this thing that's supposed to be like a big turning point just kind of never materializes. Even when they finally get to the prison, Kingpin's secret prison, it didn't even feel like that dramatic of a moment when he freed everybody. It's like, okay, they broke him out, and then that was it. And then it's just a continuation on season 1. It wasn't really that much that really like took it up another notch until we get to the end and Matt has to come out of hiding and he goes back to being a lawyer again. I think that's where the season kind of turned around a little bit. I'll talk about a little bit more when I get to Matt's overall story arc. But I felt like okay, now we're getting interested again. Now Matt's fighting back, his second favorite way to fight, or I guess it's his favorite way. He prefers not to beat people up, even though he enjoys it more than, being a lawyer, I would think. And the ending was a little convoluted. It's like, okay, people slowly turning against the Kingpin and Fisk's administration, and then, the whole courtroom thing happens, and then there's this weird standoff, sort of, in the Capitol building, and then just kind of weird melee kind of going on in different places, and it's just kind of like, all right, Fisk, take the deal and, leave. And it was kind of, with the shit that he was being accused of, the deal they gave him was a pretty lenient. And after that, he ended up probably killing a bunch of civilians, like as he was leaving the courthouse. He can maybe try to argue like, hey, they were trying to attack me. I was defending myself, and there is maybe a little bit of a argument on his behalf, but he was pretty gleefully taking these people out. So I don't know how that would have held water, but again, it didn't matter because he still got the deal. Character arcs, like I hinted about earlier, Matt's was about more of the same. It wasn't, last season about him was him trying not to be Daredevil. This time it was being almost totally Daredevil. And then, like I said, we finally get the point where he has to come out of hiding and be a lawyer again, and I think that's where it picked up for him. I was glad to see him defeat Kingpin this time in the court as a lawyer instead of like almost every other season where it ends with like a big fight. I mean, they did have a fight earlier this season, but it was just kind of like a one-off. And this time, granted he had to reveal his identity, but he was able to once and for all beat him in court. Well, as far as once and for all. Every time the Kingpin is done, he comes back. But this pretty definitively took him down legally. Also, they still got such an interesting dynamic because they kind of hate each other, but it's like they kind of also the only people that really understand each other on a certain wavelength. So it's like they had a little bit of this last season where they could sit down and have a conversation in a diner, and even here before their fight, they know each other so well and like so intimately. It's like it's kind of a shame that they're on opposite ends of the law. As far as the other characters, Karen was fine. They gave her a lot to do, but it was nothing. A lot of it was just kind of supporting Matt. She did kind of run around in the background, putting on disguises and like kind of helping the rebellion, but she wasn't as her basic. She didn't have much to dig into with her. Like this, there's just kind of like she's active, but she's not really getting anything in depth. Fisk, again, same thing with him. Like it was interesting to see him kind of losing it. With Vanessa getting killed and like him losing his grip on New York. We never got to really see him as desperate as I thought we were going to. There was a point where Kieran said he looked scared, but I don't think that really paid off. It just, he lashed out at the end and started killing some people, but I don't know. We just it never went anywhere that interesting. I thought Bullseye probably had the most unique storyline this season, where in his mind, he was trying to redeem himself as still like the minimal extent that he would allow himself to go. But it was interesting because he's an interesting character as far as he's kind of got like they said in the season, this first introduction, he needs to follow a North Star, otherwise he doesn't know how to kind of be a person. He's kind of like a murderer. He doesn't see anything wrong with murdering people unless he's got someone kind of telling him, why not to. So it's interesting, him kind of going back to like, okay, I feel like I need to be a good person, at least to balance the scales. And of course, he got probably one of the best sequences in the entire season was his ambush of the task force guys at the diner. I thought, really cool action sequence. It's kind of funny seeing him trying to be a good guy because, it's Bullseye. And I did like his send-off where he ends up basically working for the government. I thought that was a cool way to end his story. Who else? And then like some of the characters I thought were going to have a bigger impact this season, and they didn't. I thought Swordsman was going to play into things more, but it's like he got freed and then he dipped. I thought the new White Tiger was going to be a thing. Like they were kind of setting up for it, and then she just kind of randomly showed up at the end and started to help beat people up. And I was hoping she'd at least get the costume or the mask or something. But I know she had the amulet, but I was hoping to establish her as a new White Tiger. I thought Jessica Jones would be more of an impact. She shows up pretty late, and she does help out in some key moments, but it just didn't add a lot to the story itself. Like her 2 cents didn't really add, the overall story. It was just like, okay, she's back up for Matt. I thought Mr. Charles was going to be like a big wild card because he seemed to be the only one that could get one over on the Kingpin, and it's Kingpin killed his 2 bodyguards or whatever, and it's just like, oh, I guess I'm screwed. I'm done with this. So like, he ended up not being a big deal. I was really kind of hoping to see more of him, see how him kind of, like I said, kind of putting one over on the Kingpin, and it just never really happened. And then the Buck had some interesting stuff, nothing too major. Him and Daniel had some interesting interactions. It was kind of, him trying to basically corrupt him to, even more degree than he was already being corrupted. And I said, it was just interesting. It was more like a side note, like, okay, this is kind of cool. And the BB was just kind of there. The only interesting characters thing, and it wasn't something I was that into, was digging into Heather. Like, it's like, okay, she broke up with Matt last season, and now they seem like they're really struggling to give her something to do. So they kind of, now it's fine with her kind of turning heel and joining the Kingpin and convincing herself that she's doing the right thing. But I think I'd rather prefer to see her like snap out of it, like, okay, this is wrong. I'm taking things out on people that don't deserve it. And instead, she kind of became the new Muse for some reason. So I don't know how I feel about that. Because I think in the comics, Muse is killed. Spoiler for the comics, and he comes back from the dead. It's kind of more supernaturally based. And I'd rather have seen something like that as opposed to her becoming Muse. Because he had his own little gimmick, and I was like, is she going to copy the gimmick too? Is she going to be trying like an artist too? Or is she just going to wear the mask and be like kill her. Show looked good. I really liked Matt's new, black Daredevil costume that finally had the DD on it. Get a better look at Bullseye's costume. It's okay. I wish they would have accentuated like the target a little bit better, because it's dark. And in the dark, you really can't see that there's a target on his mask, and it looks just more like a generic ski mask. In the books, he's got a mask similar to Daredevil or a Batman, where his mouth is exposed. I kind of wish they would have switched it up and went with that, but it's not terrible. It kind of grew on me. The fight scenes were fine. They had some pretty cool moments, and then they seemed like they would end kind of quick. Like Matt and Bullseye had a very short but pretty cool fight. Some of the hallway fights were pretty decent. Fisk just throwing random dudes in his hallway fight and breaking backs was cool. Like, sometimes it's kind of hard. Like the very first punch, you see he killed this dude. Like he straight up one punch killed this guy. And there's a couple guys you've seen, he's breaking backs. But I wish some of that would have been clearer, that he's like, no, these guys are getting their heads caved in, or whatever he was doing to them. Otherwise, it's just him just kind of throwing people around, and didn't have as much impact as it could have. And there's another. They did this last season. There's a few moments in the fight scenes where there was stuff enhanced by CG, and it was kind of noticeable. I was like, and that didn't really look that great. But I think overall that's like the broad strokes. Like, more spoiler stuff I wanted to get into. I got some notes for the different episodes I got here, so I'm going to see if there's anything else that I want to talk about. Another thing that didn't go, there's a cool moment where Matt put a watch in the arms on the arm shipment on the ship, and you could tell he was going to use it as like a tracking device, and it barely came into play. Like, it's like he got into the secret prison, he knew that the guns were there because he heard the watch, but that was it. Then they had to screw off and do whatever. In the second episode, I do like, they give a good reason for the Kingpin not revealing that Matt is Daredevil, and just basically that it would kind of make Matt a martyr to a degree, or, especially because Matt saved his life, so it's like people would support him. I did like how he twisted that to like having Matt have to remain in hiding, because he's like, oh yeah, we need to rescue him. So I thought that was pretty good explanation for that and use of that. And I don't know where they were going. They were kind of sort of pushing this Buck Heather relationship, and they had a weird point where they were like, she was letting her choke him like kind of hard, like letting out her aggression. It was like a weird scene. I think never really. Well, anyway, that was a few episodes later. It wasn't in the second episode, but that dynamic was kind of like, I don't know about this. It seems it was a little borderline on unbelievable, but in the third episode, I liked how Matt's lawyer friend was able to remember what she was able to hear going through this prison while she was blindfolded, and tell that to Matt, and he was able to figure out where to go. But it's a little silly that she was able to remember all these like weird details, like, oh, I remember the birds flapping, and then I splashed on the puddle. But it worked for the show. And that's the only little bit we really got with Swordsman. It was him whacking people with like a stick or a pipe or whatever it was. And then, like I said, then he was off. I also liked episode 4. It was cool that Matt got the task force armor and disguised himself to be able to go out in public and investigate. So I thought that was a nice little way for him to camouflage himself in there. Again, that's had the cool fight scene with Daredevil and Bullseye in Bullseye's apartment. Figured for sure Vanessa was going to get killed, but they did a pretty good misdirect where it looked like Fisk was able to block Bullseye's projectile, and then we see that it did hit Vanessa. And then the next episode, they did the old maneuver where someone recovers and you think they're fine, and then they just end up dying anyways. Like I've seen this in a few shows in the past, and it's not quite cliche, but it is a little bit. It was a decent flashback episode. It's nice to see Matt and Foggy kind of going like a little more context of what Vanessa was up to before she met Fisk, even though it wasn't all that super interesting. Didn't feel like that Buck was gonna kill Daniel, but it was hard to see who they had in the trunk at the end. I was like, ooh, I had to look it up and see that was the first mate of the ship. Just the way the doctor that operated Vanessa was talking is like, this guy's probably going to get killed by Fisk. And he really pushed his luck, and of course, got his back broken. I said, we finally get Jessica Jones, a little bit about what Luke's been up to, and now they got the kid, and their powers are fading in and out. But nice catching up with them. Again, she didn't add all that much to the story. And I wish we would have seen more how this ties into Mr. Charles, but that's just another weird moment where Heather steals like a piece of jewelry from the Kingpin's like room for some reason, and somehow he knew she was the one, unless Buck noticed it was her and told him she was in there. That was like a whole weird thing. Then I know they slipped BB this this little I don't know what you call it, like a thumb drive or something in her pocket, and then Daniel found it there. So I don't know, was it still in her coat the whole time? She didn't know it, or was that like a different thing that she was keeping there, or were people just always slipping her shit in her pocket? Like, that was kind of a weird moment. Kind of surprised that Daniel was going to betray her. Like, if that's his girl basically, and not girlfriend, but his like good friend that he was interested in for more than friends. I was like pretty shocked that it looked like he was going to turn her over to Buck, and at the last minute, he didn't. So nice little sacrifice on his end. I guess if there was this original version of that, Buck did not kill him, and he just lied to the Kingpin. I think it worked better the way they did it. Finale, because it was nice to see Luke Cage pop up at the end. I hear rumors he's going to be showing up in season 3, and possibly some other Defenders. So that'd be interesting to catch up with all those characters again. But I think that's it. I think I've gone through my notes. I've gone through my general spoilers and anything else I wanted to talk about in here. Again, it wasn't a bad season. It just never really. There was no big emotional moments in it. It was like last season had that big thing between Daredevil and Punisher. They were like, I guess you call it a heart-to-heart. Like, it just didn't have anything that really gripped me this season. There was some cool fight scenes, but they were a little short. The story just was like interesting. Like, every week I'm like, okay, Daredevil's on, but I was never like, oh, I can't wait to see what happens next. So, I said there is a season 3 coming. Rumor has it that the ratings are really low this season, so season 3 could potentially be the final season, so we'll have to see. Other than that, like I said earlier, I have the mostly spoiler-free version of this review up. And I also have some other movie reviews, some TV show reviews. I got a comic strip that I do, and that's all at soundedbetterinmyhead.com. So if you want to check any of that stuff out, that's awesome. And other than that, thanks for watching.